Okay, welcome back. My name is Last No Meal, and today with me I have an amazing guest. Today with us is Mr. Mike Pondsmith, the creator of Cyberpunk. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much from all of us here that you are actually joining this interview.
Hey, no problem. I'm honored that you gave me a call and invited me.
I'm going to be talking about some of the things like Cyberpunk 2077. I'm going to talk about Cyberpunk as a genre, like this subgenre. We're going to be talking a bit at the end about the new upcoming Witcher, which is a tabletop RPG, if I'm not wrong. Because I saw on your
Uh,
website that some of those things is in development. So if there is an option to talk about that, it's amazing.
okay, yeah. You'll want to also, in terms of Witcher,
Mm-hmm.
you'll probably want to talk to Cody
Mm-hmm.
Pondsmith because he's the main lead developer on it. I'm just a fan in that
Oh.
particular area.
Oh, that I'm gonna try to set that up. That's gonna be amazing because I'm really interested about that.
Well, he interviews pretty well.
Yeah, he's your son, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Ah. So my first question is, are you like satisfied with the current way the game is going? Obviously, there has been so much in your head throughout all these years of just creating the universe. Are you satisfied with how the game itself is progressing so far?
Oh, I'm very satisfied. I would almost say that if I had done it myself, it would have been very much like what they've done. And considering I do have a background in video game development, I can say that with some authority.
Yeah, exactly, because CDPR is definitely one of those companies that is putting a lot of effort and passion into creating their games. I think Cyberpunk is definitely going to get the respect and everything it deserves to be a great adaptation.
Well, what's interesting is that it's the first group of people who've wanted to do something with the Cyberpunk 2020
Mm-hmm.
property who actually are fans.
Mm,
They were fans. They approached us as fans. And the great part about getting people who love the material is you know they're going to try to get the material the right way because they loved it in the beginning. That's what attracted them to it. And yeah, and basically the problem is when you have someone who's just looking at it as a property,
mm.
they're more likely to just skin whatever you're doing over whatever capabilities and technology they already have.
Exactly, because one thing I actually saw that gamers can definitely notice if that a video game has a soul. They can actually see that someone puts a lot of effort in creating it, and there's definitely much more appreciation towards those games.
Agreed.
Yeah.
One of the fun parts about it is that unlike other licensed situations, I'm actually pretty, solidly
Mm.
involved in it. And that is by their choice as well. It's not like I just pushed my way into it. They are interested in getting the input, and there's a definite two-way street there in terms of communication.
Exactly, exactly, because it's only going to benefit the project at the end because they're going to have a lot more information and another pair of eyes from the creator to adapt it as best as they can.
I like to think so.
Yeah, I also want to talk about a bit about character creation and decision making. Obviously, what we've seen in the past CDPR games that decisions are very important, and what we've seen in Cyberpunk 2020, because it is a tabletop RPG, decisions that you make in certain situations are crucial to let's say completing a mission or something like that. So I'm just wondering like how many approaches are we going to have to a certain quest? Are we going to be using a sneak option or full guns blazing or hacking, etc., etc.?
Well, actually, I can now tell you
Mm,
that sort of thing a
mm,
bit more. Um, the first thing is that the approach is very, very wide, as would be in the role-playing game itself. Um, there is no one way to do all the quests or a particular type of quest. So if you go in as a solo and you're a gun guy, you can gun your way through it, but you may find instead that you are better served if you're attacking from a stealth position or a political area. For example, in the demo, our main character uses a couple different ways to tackle the problems. One of the things that we really discussed quite a bit is the idea that there wasn't one path to win, that there wasn't a best strategy. And this went down on a lot of the decisions between the team and my discussions with them and so forth was leave it open, let people find their own way to navigate through. There shouldn't be just one best way to do it. And I think that's very well effectively done in this iteration.
Yeah, definitely, because especially they said that the game is going to have a full melee system. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to play with melee weapons.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I love is the fact that they put a lot of care and effort and interest into the weapons of all types, whether melee, guns, cyberware, et cetera, et cetera. I know I was in the right place when I walked in about a year ago, and I was going through one of the areas where they're developing the weapons and so like that, and they have an entire wall of guns. And I said, this is my place.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But yeah, definitely, because we also know now that the game is going to be from first-person perspective. Obviously, the choice behind it is definitely to get immersed more in the game, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, definitely. And I thoroughly support the first-person perspective, and a couple of reasons why. One of them is the density of the world is best perceived that way. And I don't mean just that you're in the world and you have more of a sense of being part of it, but that you perceive things within the world differently. I'll give you an example. In one of the demo sections, you're going down a street and there are conversations happening all around you. Now, normally, if you're back on a third-person perspective, you know who's saying it, you have greater situational awareness, but when you're involved in it, when you are in that first-person view, you heard something out of the corner of your eye, so to speak, or your ear, and you have the choice. You can ignore it, you can turn and walk away from it. You can, and particularly in this game, the options are oftentimes there, turn around and engage in that conversation. So I heard things just walking to my car that I wanted to go follow up on.
Oh.
I wanted to know why this person said this thing that I heard out of the corner of my eye, or, and you're sort of over there just out of hearing, because that is what happens in real life on the street.
Exactly.
So that's one reason why the first-person view works much better. Wow. You deal with and perceive your environment in a more realistic way. Second, the problem with third versus first is that your situational awareness in third is way, way, way too big. And in an environment where it's claustrophobic, where things can be moving in and on, you don't want to have the ability to see all threats and be able to have a strategic view of the world. You want to have a tactical view. You want to have a view, a perception of the world, which is based on what your character would know. If you're in third, your character can see the whole area. It's one step below the map. You have a big map, and usually there's dots on it, says here's the threat, and here's so forth. And I've worked on games where that's been a big question. How much do I want my player to see? In this situation, you want your player to interact with events as they occur to and around them, and not as a general, but as a soldier.
Oh, damn. Because especially I do want to talk about Night City in general, is that they are really aiming that to create a very much living city. And having a first-person perspective is you can definitely feel that city, especially because of verticality, because I've heard that the game, it is going to have a lot of verticality throughout the entire map.
Yeah, I love their version of Night City. It is basically right out of my brain. There are elements in there that they came up with that I'd always kind of known about Night City as a character, but I'd never had a reason to really tell people about. And this brings those elements forward. you get that sense of verticality. It's always been there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not something you normally talk about in a tabletop game, and it's definitely difficult to talk about when you're writing rules to
Yes,
give
yeah.
that impression.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I love the fact that the city is a living, breathing place. I've often said that Night City is basically one of the primary characters in the 2020 universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a great believer that in any cyberpunk city, any cyberpunk setting, in fact, that the city needs to be a character because that's what makes the place different. It makes it more than what we're in on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
you want to be there. You want to involve yourself in that city. You want to drown yourself in that city. You want to have places you go in that city where you look out over the city or you hang out places or you enjoy particular views or people that show up on the street corners just like you would in a real environment.
Wow. Having something like that in a video game is just impressive to like have a real living city with so many things to interact with. And what was trying to always like ask is since of course the game is going to have weather cycle, the day and night cycle, is the city going to change during the night? Is it going to be more dangerous to like let's say walk in some areas in the map during the night?
I would assume so. I can't really address
Mm-hmm.
that solidly, but Night City, as designed in the tabletop, does that.
No.
Literally, environments that look safe during the day aren't safe at night. I'll give you a real-life version of that, and they'll give you a kind of in-game version. A bunch of years back, I got invited to a rave in Munich.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the downtown, and it's, during the day, it's businessmen and secretaries, and it's all clean and bright and so forth like that. But at night, it's really quiet. There's a lot of really wide open, empty alleys. There's people flitting in and out. There's stuff going on. If a guy who normally would be driving by in his BMW during the day was just a banker, now you don't know whether that isn't some guy who's about to jump out of the car and beat the crud out. You know, environments change, cities change, time of day changes. We have elements of that in the tabletop with encounter tables that are designed to look at the same area, but look at it in terms of what changed during the day. And I sort of assume, based on what we're seeing so far, that that's what we're aiming to get in Night City now.
Wow, that's gonna be great to see, like especially the contrast and like the sunset and the sunrise. It's definitely gonna be great from everything we've seen from the new trailer. Like in-engine footage looks great, looks really great.
Yeah, it's an interesting experiment. Somebody on one of the Reddits over here did a reimagining of the sequence of being sitting on his car looking out over the city. And he did a version of it where it was night, and he did a version where it was later sunset.
Oh.
And what I thought was fascinating was it's the same environment, but the feel is different. And it shows that just the time of day and the weather can drastically change how you perceive that environment.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who were shocked by the idea that Night City had a bright, sunny day, these are people who have never hung out in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
You
like
know,
those
Vegas is
cities
a
can
different
change.
town. Yeah, Vegas is a different town day and night, but it's still an intense situation. And how you approach it is very much based on what time of day, what's the weather like,
Exactly, because like in real life, if you walk, let's say through a valley during an alley during the day, if like a couple of people walk by, you're not going to notice them that much as you would during the night because you think of them as threats. So something like that in a game would be just insane, getting attacked out of nowhere. That would be
Yeah,
a
and
great thing.
it's it's really funny because what happens is, I've lived in environments where that was very true. Places I would usually not go during the night, but, I'm there all the time during the day. I love San Francisco, for example, but, as someone who's lived there for, many, many decades, I realized very soon there were places I was not going to go at night, at least not without packing a fair amount of hardware.
Exactly. Same in Cyberpunk. Same thing. Also want to talk about V. He is, obviously, we do know that he is an hired gun. Usually those people operate on a very thin, how would I say, gray line. So I also want to talk about character development throughout the game. Is there going to be some sort of a karma system or something where basically our decisions, how we make them, are going to define our character? Are we going to be bad? Are we going to be good? Or are we going to be something in between?
I can't really answer that for specifics, but I will tell you that one of the binding philosophies of the game is that your actions have consequences.
That's exactly.
And that, once again, also goes back to the original sources in the tabletop game. In the tabletop game, there is no system for karma, good things, and so forth. But you can pretty much guess that if you blow away some guy in a gang, his gang's going to remember, and they're going to find you.
Ooh, that's nice.
That is realistic. That is the way things really go. Sometimes karma is not meted out in a really nice, neat, dark side, light side way. Sometimes it comes and bites you in the butt in ways you never expected. We were kidding the other day in the office about that moment when you're driving on a freeway and somebody cuts you off and you flip them off, and then you go into your bank and there's the guy you flipped off behind the counter. This sort of stuff happens.
Yeah, it does.
Karma is not a black and white thing, but your actions do have consequences. In the original trailer, I love the fact that the music piece they picked was called Personal Responsibility, because it sort of said everything there.
Yes. Especially because it's definitely it's going to immerse us more in the game, because we have to think twice before every decision, oh, is this going to bite me in the ass? Or is this going to help me? That's always it has a plus and a minus. I think every single decision does.
Exactly. And it's a better arrangement than having an arbitrary, you're doing good points or bad points. I really hate, personally, in anything I play, the idea that I have a light side or a dark side I have to follow. I'd make a terrible Jedi.
Yeah, there will always be in between. Okay, so it's definitely great that the game is coming out, that we're finally gonna be able to see everything that you and the team in Poland, CDPR, has been working on. It's gonna be great to experience everything from the tabletop, and then it's adapted into a media which you can have sound, you can have the graphics, everything is going to be packaged into one thing, which is all going to help the experience.
What I'm really amazed at is that there's two things. First of all, the fidelity of what was in, basically words and pictures, and how it translated into an actual living world, into a game where you can get the sound and the feeling and so forth like that. The other thing I'm really happy about is now that the trailer is out and people have seen it, now that some people have seen gameplay, I don't have this massive secret I've been sitting on for close to 3 years. Every time I'd see, the trailer that people saw the gameplay, I saw that a while back. Before I was in Poland, everybody said, "Hey, Mike, you have to see this. Come on, we've got it now." And I'm in there looking at it, and we're walking around, we're doing things, and I'm going, "So what do you think about this? Shall we have that?" And I'm going to go home now, and except for 2 staffers who are in on it, I can't tell anyone, not even in Talsorian, what I just saw. So how was it, Mike? It was awesome. What happened? I can't tell you.
Oh,
and
my.
Now I can do this. The last time I had to sit on a secret like this was many years ago when the first Raiders of the Lost Ark came out. and my wife and I saw it at like midnight in a screening that they were doing just in this
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
little theater somewhere. And it was like one of those midnight secret screenings,
mm-hmm.
and no one else saw it. And we weren't going to see it for another couple of days. And we saw it. We walked out. And we said, "Oh my God, we've got to tell." No, we can't tell that. That'll ruin it. But what about the part where he? No, we can't talk about that. And we walked around for a whole day or so
Mm.
with this incredible secret we wanted to share and could not share. This game has been like that.
Oh
I've been
yeah.
able to see it in process, and there are things I've seen that I still can't tell you
Mm-hmm,
about,
mm-hmm.
but it's pretty darn amazing.
Obviously, because it's always it's great. Like none of us, I think, like expected that Cyberpunk is gonna be shown at E3. And when like the year was starting and more information was coming out, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be amazing because we're gonna finally see something. But there's so much more to be seen. I'm just glad that now they're gonna be more open to talk about a lot of new things that they're going to implement.
Well, CDPR earns our respect because they are very careful.
Mm-hmm.
They are exacting. They know what they want to do, and they're not afraid to go to the wall to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
But that involves a great deal of just keeping your cards close to your chest. Doing that allows you to try new things, to experiment, and to surprise people. If it's all out there all the time, people can make assumptions, and they can drive how you are going to do a particular thing within the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be problematic because sometimes people don't know what they want.
Mm.
They
Yeah,
see something new and they go, wow, why didn't we have that before? Well, you wouldn't have thought of that
exactly.
because it wasn't something you had seen before. Case in point, people expected Night City to be all dark and gloomy. And there are points where it is dark and
Yeah.
gloomy, and I wouldn't want to get up there late at night. But that's what you expect.
Mm.
Seeing the harsh light of day on some of those environments
Mm.
is really cool because what it does is exposes it even more than that kind of comforting, almost dimly lit rain slick streets.
Mm.
It's sort of like what I deal with, in my home Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
where it's normally kind of rainy and dark all the time. But when the sun comes out, that brilliance kind of changes the entire texture of
Definitely.
what Seattle is like, which is actually ravingly beautiful. The same thing. No one knew that they wanted to see a cyberpunk city in daylight.
Mm.
Now they know.
And it's
If we had
amazing.
told them they're going to, they would have made decisions already. They would have said yay or nay. This way they have something different that they may have never thought they really wanted.
Exactly. It was a very refreshing thing because everyone were expecting that, but we got like a day, like it was during the day. It was actually during, there's some scenes like during the night, and even though most
Yes.
of it is during the day, you can definitely see Cyberpunk because I want to talk about that in like next part as a genre. Everything is there, everything that Cyberpunk represents. And I also want to ask about Cyberpunk in real life. Do you think that Cyberpunk is going to be our future? Because it kind of looks right now where it's everything going with technology, etc., etc., that we're definitely going towards some version of Cyberpunk.
I think we're kind of there in a lot of
Mm.
ways. My son likes to say, Dad, think happy thoughts, because too much of the stuff that I talk about or write about does eventually come to pass. So, I'm kind of cautious about that now. And it's actually been a bit of a joke in the tabletop game industry so badly that somebody actually wrote in one of their modules the idea that I was actually a prophet that nobody ever listened to. And I ended up living on a street corner somewhere saying, but wait, I'm warning you, it's coming. And no one
Exactly.
listened. But I think we're headed towards it,
Mm.
but in a way nobody may have seen. And this boils down to one of the essential elements of cyberpunk, I believe,
Mm.
and that is the interface of people and technology. We have reached a place in technology where it is extremely personal, not just from the use capability,
Mm-hmm.
but from the creation technology.
Definitely.
We can, okay, for example, cyber arms.
Mm.
Um, my daughter just the other day came in and said, "Hey, Dad, check out this cyber arm I made." And she had made this really great looking prop
Mm.
that I would have seen on a TV show. It was a beautiful piece of work.
Wow.
But the capacity to make that came along because she had access to 3D printers
Mm.
and other things, and she could build this thing that before could only have been done by a professional prop master. She had technology, she had tools, she had materials. But on the same hand, there are people building real prosthetics right now and throwing those
Mm.
designs up on Shapeways and other resource areas
Mm.
so that a child who's born without an arm can get an arm built, downloaded, bespoke, as it
Mm.
were. Well, that means that the idea of just cybernetics is no longer something from a really powerful top-down group.
Mm.
It's now at the street level, and people can make it. Just like now I can make weapons,
Mm.
I can make computers, I can make cell phones, I can, all these things are there.
Mm.
In addition, speaking of cell phone, my cell phone has just told me it
Mm.
wants attention.
Mm.
I'm going to turn it off. Um, the beauty of this is that the street has access. So it means that even though there are very powerful forces out
Mm-hmm.
there, corporations, governments, wealthy people, dangerous people who control things, terrorists, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
people can get that technology and apply it within their own sphere to protect themselves, to communicate, to create.
Mm.
Um, I am always fascinated by fandoms
Mm.
because on some of the best fandoms, I will see creative work done by fans
Mm.
that is equal, if not better, than the things that the people who originally produced the material have done.
Mm.
A couple of years back, a fan group did a Star Trek piece that I remember looking at going, this is better than what I'm currently watching on TV. And this is a bunch of fans
Mm.
who have access to the computers and the technology to make this.
Mm. Exactly. Exactly.
And and that's going to change things because it means that information, media, technology is going to be a two-way street. And that is very cyberpunk.
Mm. Exactly. Like how we use that technology. Like there's obviously gonna be people who are gonna get access to that technology and are going to use it in a bad way, but it's not only that. There's always people who are going to use it for good, and
Hmm.
that's exactly what you were talking about. I also wanted to ask about like the influence behind the creation of Cyberpunk 2020 and the whole universe. Like, what inspired you to create that?
I've explained this before, but it's kind of odd.
Mm.
I started with Blade Runner,
Mm-hmm.
and I walked out of Blade Runner having seen it, and I said to my girlfriend, I either hate this movie or I really love it. I'm not sure which. So I went back the next night and I came out and said, I love this movie. But I loved it because the world was amazing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I loved what it said about what we would do with technology, what we would do to build that world. So that was one big influence right there.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a world like that. I love also film noir, and that element was also definitely Blade Runner, because one of the things about film noir that is parallel to the cyberpunk ethos, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
is people at the bottom of the social or economic heap
Mm. Yep.
still have the things they believe in and they fight for them. So it's the classic um, Deckard could almost be a Humphrey Bogart character
Mm.
on Big Sleep.
That's great.
The same elements are really there. This is the little guy. You're little people.
Mm,
But yeah, I'm still going to go to the wall on this. I'm going to bring you down because I believe what I'm doing is right. And technology levels it out to make it possible for me to do that.
mm,
You don't have things at your disposal that I might not be able to get just through the black market.
mm-hmm.
So that was one big effect. The next one, interestingly enough, was a Walter John Williams Hardwired. And I had not actually heard of William Gibson at the time. In fact, later I did find Gibson stuff, and I went, oh my God, as I said to my wife, this guy is so good he makes my teeth hurt.
Yeah, he's
But
really good.
he has just a way of just turning phrases. But it was not, oddly enough, the core of what I was aiming for in the original Cyberpunk. Actually, what Walter wrote was much more, I'd say, elemental to what I was doing. Because in there you have heroes who are fighting against the man, and they're not at the bottom of the heap. They're not, going to always lose. They are active. They are, making choices. Sometimes they affect the world, but oftentimes they affect those people's worlds, what's personal to them. And there was a certain kind of in-your-face rock and roll kind of quality to Hardwired that I just loved. And I said, okay, I now have both sides of it. And I lucked out because it turned out that Walter actually knew some friends of mine and was in a game of Mechton, which is our giant robot game. And so when I was talking to Rob, who was running the game, Rob said, hey, you want a Cyberpunk writer to, give you ideas? And I went, whoa, really? Sure. Yeah, it's this guy, Walter John Williams. I'm going, yeah, I'm in. And Walter not only worked as a playtester and beat up on things and made sure they worked, but he actually wrote a supplement out of the Hardwired universe. I went, oh, I'm so lucky I got the fanboy on that one.
My God.
So yeah, basically, that's where the beginning, and then as time went on between my interest in Japanese anime, Ghost in the Shell, Akira, many things like that, Appleseed, which is another brilliant piece, plus now the infusion of Gibson's work, I aimed to get something that had a combination of many forms of cyberpunk, something that was a cyberpunk that wasn't all one flavor, but many different flavors.
Yes.
So there's a little Road Warrior, there's a little Akira, there's a little Gibson, there's a little Hardwire, there's a little Blade Runner, there's a little of everything because, just like there's no one way to do a Western or a mystery novel or even a police procedural, there's no one way to do cyberpunk.
Exactly, and that's what I really like. That's what basically CDPR said, and I think you mentioned it in one of the interviews, that Cyberpunk 2077 is not about saving the world, it's about saving yourself, because you said there's a lot of personal things in the universe itself, a lot about the people.
That was one of the big discussions we had when we were first putting this together, because I spent a lot of time with the story team. And it took me a while to get it across them because many of the first plot lines and stories were saving the world. And I said, you don't save the world in Cyberpunk. You save yourself. And if you happen to save the world along the way, you kind of go, yeah, okay, cool. But you're dealing with your world, your issues, the people you care about. It's very, very personal.
Exactly. And the last topic I want to talk about today, because we've been going for too long, I don't want to hold you anymore. I know you're busy. What is the current state of the Witcher Tabletop RPG? What can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, it has an interesting history. While I played Witcher and love it because it's really, really well done, fantasy is not usually my thing. I live in the future. But what happened was my son played Witcher, and he came out and said, this is just awesome. This is amazing stuff. And weirdly enough, my wife also became a massive Witcher fan, to the point where they were not just reading the novels, but they were actually starting to learn Polish so he could get the novels ahead of time. And it was Witcher, Witcher, Witcher. So at one point he said, I want to do, well, actually I'll have to go back. The CDPR guys approached my wife, who's our business manager, and said, you know anybody who could do a tabletop game of this? We'd like to do a tabletop Witcher game. And she said, yeah, I'll look around. And Cody heard and said, I want to do this. And I said, okay, but if you do it alone. I'm not helping you on this. Fantasy is not what I do. And, you know, nobody helped me do my first game. So you're on your own, buddy. And he had one advantage, which was that they insisted it be based on the Cyberpunk system because they were Cyberpunk players. So basically I said, okay, you get to pitch this. And he went over there during one of my my trips over there to work on Cyberpunk, and he pitched them the game. And they went, this is great. You answered all these questions. This really works. Yeah, okay, you have it. And he walked back out and said, well, you have it. Now let's see what you can do with it. And so they've been working on this just hammer and tongs for the last 3.5 years. It is currently, it's past approvals. It is currently at the printers, and our goal is to have it there for Gen Con, which has sort of been the goal we're aiming at. And they're already starting to set up the next 2 supplements that are coming as fast as possible. And it's really, really a solid piece of work. It's good. And I say that not because, well, you know, it's a family member who worked on it, but rather as someone who's had to judge both as a teacher and as a developer whether somebody is good. It's solid. And we've had people in the industry, reviewers and so on, look it over and go, yeah, this is solid work. So it's, and one of the things I really love is because they love Witcher, it wasn't just we're doing the video game. They went through the books. They went through the comics. They went through the source books. They talked to people in Poland. They, you know, they left no stone unturned.
Oof, a lot of passion behind it.
Yes. Let's put it this way, we can wrap it on it, is they signed up to go to Poland to go to Witcher camp. Literally, there's a live-action Witcher camp where you run through the forest and go through the Trial of the Grasses, and it's physically grueling and intense and a whole bit, and they signed up for it.
Wow, didn't know.
And the only reason there was a mess up in terms of passports or something on their flight, so they couldn't make it. But yeah, they were that hardcore. They were going to go to Witcher school, by God, you know.
My God, that's amazing. No, I'm definitely looking forward to that. I think people are interested in this, and I'm definitely going to follow the development of this. And the last question for today is for the viewers. If you have anything to say to the fans and to the viewers, what would you say?
Well, first of all, thanks, guys, for following our stuff, caring about it, and letting us know that you really enjoy it. It means a lot to us to know we've left an impact on people. 2, it's going to be a really great ride when you see it. Like I said, I get to see stuff ahead of you that I can't tell you about, unfortunately, but what I see is a thing of beauty. And I think you're going to love it as much as I love it.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming to the interview, and I'm looking forward to more information about the game as they get released. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.